Right, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I hope you're having or you've had a good weekend and that your Monday hasn't been too blue. So welcome to today's session. This is our fourth session for this month. No, it's our fourth session. My name is Lauren, and I'm the facilitator for this module. For those of you who are new to the sessions, welcome. And for those who have been joining us, welcome back. I hope that you're finding these sessions really helpful, and that it is contributing and adding value to your studies. So in the chat, you'll see that we have posted the link to the attendance register. As those of you who have been with us know by now, standard procedure. If you could please just access the link there and access the attendance register and fill that out. Okay, so for the benefit of those who are new, I'm not sure how many are new, so I'm going to assume that we do have some new people. I'm just wanting to highlight a few things on this slide. One of those being that as we are in the session, you are expected to please keep your microphones and videos off. This is, of course, so that it eliminates distractions during the session in case, it is the evening, we're all home. Maybe there's family or kids in the background or TV's playing, and we don't want that to interrupt with the session. And also, because it does consume data, especially if other people's videos are on. That's why my video is also not on. So we are being mindful of data costs and so forth. Right. So another important thing I just want to highlight for those who have just joined, please access the attendance register. There's a link in the chat box. Please just click on that and fill in your details. Another important thing that I wanted to note again is that we do have one-on-one consultations available for this module. So if there's anything that you're struggling with, please feel free to schedule a one-on-one consultation, and we can discuss around a specific topic that you may have or that you may be struggling with. I am available and I am quite flexible in terms of setting up different times. Our consultation, of course, would not be during this time because we have the class, but I am flexible to whatever time works for you, granted that, my schedule is also allows for that. So please feel free if you are struggling with assignments or just reading of your reading and understanding your study guide or exam prep. Please reach out. We are here to help you. And that is it. At the end of the session, we'll also have the evaluation form linked in the chat. So closer to the end, if you could also please just access that and fill that in so that we can also get the feedback from you guys about how you are finding these sessions and if they are really meeting your need. All right, are there any questions around our general discussion, our general intro there? Anyone who's new who might have a question about the process? Okay, I'm going to assume we're all on the same page. If there is anything you want to ask or add during the session, please feel free to make use of the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or it's at the bottom if you're on your laptop. I think it's at the top if you're on the phone. So you can make use of that, and I will recognize you, and you'll be able to either just unmute your mic so that we can hear your question, or if you feel more comfortable, you can just put it in the chat and I will address it. All right. So we'll get started with just a quick recap about what we discussed last week. We talked about questions and the importance of understanding different types of questions. Why we looked at questions was because a lot of the time we find that students do know the content. They have read their study guide. They know what's happening, they know what's expected of them, but then they get to the exam and or even assignments, and then they struggle. And the struggle really comes from that sometimes it's the way that the question is asked that throws you off as a student. It can get very tricky the way questions are asked, so that's why we really looked at the importance of not only understanding what we read, but also understanding the questions that are asked to us so that you can know what is expected of you. So you might know the content, but if you don't understand the question, you might give the incorrect answer, even though you know the answer, right? So that's very important, and that's what we looked at last week. And then we looked at different types of questions. We looked at, you have closed questions, open questions, probing questions, leading questions, loaded questions, funnel questions, recall and process questions, and rhetorical questions. So we have all come across all of these types of questions at some point in our lives. So they are not completely new to us. The purpose of us really highlighting and describing each one of these question types was so that we know what is expected when a particular question is asked. For example, what the response that an open question requires from you is very different from the response that a closed question requires of you. And then, so it's also important to identify what type of question are you being asked. I think that I think that is where we should start. When we are confronted with a question in our exams or in our assignments, ask yourself, what kind of question is this? And I want you to also maybe think about this beyond your RSC module and think about your other modules, because you might find that RSC only has one type of question that is routinely asked, but in your other modules, you might have other types of questions. So it is important that you also know this. And I mean, one of the things with these sessions is not only that we want you to help with the skills to pass this module, but all modules. So the topics that we discuss are quite general, but I'll always try to relate it back to our module. But these are skills that we hope you would be able to apply in different contexts and in your other modules. So when you think about, I think a few students maybe last week might have felt that going into all of these questions was maybe not so necessary, considering that we only have one type of question in this module. But yeah, I just want to highlight that this can be applied once we have knowledge. We are not restricted to where we use the knowledge. So you can, of course, apply the knowledge gained here in different spaces. And then we looked at the type of question that we are faced with in this particular module. And that was the multiple choice question, which is a form of a closed question. And we said that closed questions are very restrictive, are very specific in what they want you to answer. your closed question usually only has one answer, or there's no sort of maybe, maybe not, or maybe you can get half a mark if you explain something kind of correctly. It has to be this or that. So an example of a closed question would be our yes/no questions. So, did you go to the park? Yes or no? You can't maybe go to the park, right? That would be very strange. You can't almost go. I mean, you can almost go to the park, but that is not what the question is asking you. Another type of closed question we have is our multiple choice questions. Our multiple choice question, which gives you a list of options, but again, usually only one answer is correct. In other cases, there may be multiple answers that are correct, but then it's only those answers. And those are usually in the case of lists of things that form part of a particular concept. Another type of a closed question that we routinely see in our assessments here is the true or false question. This again is a closed question because it can only be true or it can only be false. There's no explanation needed. So the lady was pregnant, true or false? It can only be one or the other. She can't be both pregnant and not pregnant, right? So there's only one answer there. Yes, so those are the types of questions that we see, and why they are closed questions is because, like I said, in most cases there is only one answer and there is no space for explanation. And maybe I should just highlight that that is what makes the big difference between closed and open questions. The open question actually allows you to give an explanation, actually allows you to motivate your response. So an example of an open question: how do you feel about being a student? Right? So there's no one right answer. We can get a number of answers from the number of students, and they can all be right. So it just depends on how well you motivate your answer. Right? Are there any questions on that? Or maybe before I take questions, I'll just cover the last point. So after we talked about our types of questions. We then looked at the multiple choice question in particular, because that is the question that we see in this module. And we looked at different strategies on how to answer multiple choice questions. We understand that, our experience makes us to understand that multiple choice questions can be quite tricky, especially when the words all look the same or the response answers options all look the same. So one of the main things that came up in this part of our session was that it's important to read the questions carefully and then read the answer responses carefully as well. You will never find the same answer option twice in one question. So you might look at it, and if you're just reading very fast, you will say, oh no, D and E are the same answer. But there might be that one word that makes D different from E. And those words are usually small, so it can be the difference between and or, which will completely change the meaning of your answer option. So that was one main thing. And then another strategy we discussed was that of elimination. Sometimes if you really don't know, you can go by process of elimination. Hello, I am so sorry about that. I just got disconnected. Yeah, I hope we didn't miss anything. Sorry about that. This is one of the joys of the digital space and online learning is we need to also adapt to the challenges that come with being in the online space. So as I was saying, what was I saying? Yes, as I was saying, the difference between and or completely changes the meaning of a text. So that's why it is important to really take note of those. And then I think I was actually talking about the process of elimination, where you'll just remove the ones that are obviously incorrect, and hopefully you're left with two, and it's really a case of what makes the most sense. But I just want to stress that multiple choice questions are not an excuse to not study. I think a lot of students are a bit more relaxed when it comes to multiple choice exams because they feel that it is a case of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And it may well be the case, but the chances of you passing by just eeny, meeny, miny, mowing are very slim. So multiple choice exams really count in your favor once you have actually delved into the content, once you have actually studied, it actually becomes one of the easiest exams or assessments to do. So just want to highlight that studying still is important with these types of questions. All right, are there any questions at this point about the recap from last week? Any concerns, any additions, any comments? You're most welcome. All right, I don't see any questions, so we'll move on to today's focus, which is on text analysis. And why I felt that it is important is all that we've been doing is all that we have been trying to do up to this point is really understanding what we are engaging in, understanding our study guide, understanding our questions, understanding what we're reading, because with I am so sorry, I just got disconnected again. I will just have to change my network here. If you would just give me a minute so I can connect to a more secure network. Okay, I am back and I hope that we won't have any further distractions. Okay, so, wow, it really does throw you off a little bit, but let me just try to get my bearings back. Right, so text analysis then gives us a process by which we can increase the way, or just facilitate our understanding of the contents that we are dealing with. So how do we go about ensuring that we really understand? Of course, it is not a process that we need to follow rigidly, but I think it will give us a few key points to think about when we are reading and engaging with our study material, so that we are able to really get more out of our reading sessions or our study sessions as we go along. All right, so what exactly is text analysis? Really, it's this process of reading. It's this process of engaging with the text. And with the text, I think I just need to point out again, I want us to think about more broadly how we implement and how we apply these notions and these skills to our broader life. Is that when we're engaging with the text, it's not only our academic text, we could also be a movie that we're watching. Yes, we can analyze a movie, and a movie is text. We can analyze a novel, we can analyze pictures, we analyze social media posts. Actually, we probably do this already without knowing what we're doing. So as we're engaging with these things, with these elements, we begin to understand the meaning of it, right? So it's very different from just, okay, maybe if I can give an example, very different from, when you're just scrolling on social media. So you're scrolling, you're not really engaging with what you're reading. But if you come across something that interests you, or a post that interests you, that's usually when you stop, right? You stop and you read it carefully, and you start trying to make connections in your head about what this means, or maybe you start trying to formulate a response around it if it's something that you feel very strongly about. Then you start already thinking about what you think about what this person has posted, what your opinions are, or you start questioning, like, what is this person's like thinking pattern for them to get to this point. Sometimes you're just so flabbergasted by what people are posting that you sit there and you're like, how did this person come to this conclusion? Like, I don't understand. And then you sit there and you start engaging with that text. And in that, you're actually analyzing text. So it's not something that is only restricted to our academic space. So why is it then so challenging if it's something that we're always doing? Well, I think when we bring it into the academic space, it becomes challenging, or we perceive it to be challenging because we don't understand, or we don't realize that this is something we do all the time. And we see our academic material as something a bit more foreign and something that needs to be handled, or just looked at a bit differently. So I think this is why it usually is so challenging. And also when we are engaging with our academic text, I believe that because it is more of an obligation, we don't really take time to sit down and engage with it. We want to get to the end of the chapter so that we can answer those questions, or we want to get to the end of the section so we can go back to our assignment and find the question which relates to this. So we're doing it with sort of the aim of it. So we're seeing the reading of our academic material as an ends to a means. Is it as a means to an end, and not as the means itself? Actually, it is the means itself, because once you engage with that text critically, whatever question is asked to you about that, you should be able to answer. So in that itself, you are in engaging with that text itself, you are actually allowing yourself, or empowering and equipping yourself to be able to answer any questions about it. So I think why it's important, I maybe did touch on already. You know, it helps us to really see beyond the text. It helps us to engage. And once you're engaging with something, it sticks in your head a bit more, right? Just like the social media example, I don't remember any of the things I've been scrolling on for the past 20 minutes, but I will remember that one post that made me stop, and think, or comment on it, or like on it, right? Because I engage with it, so I will still remember it as I'm going about my day. So we're able to retain, it helps us to retain information a lot better. And that's what we want. That's when learning happens, right? So what is reading and what is text? I think I'm just going to quickly go through that. Of course, we know reading is reading. How does one actually define reading? It's very interesting. I never thought of that. But yeah, reading and text, you know, go in hand in hand. We read text. We engage with, we engage with text, whether passively or actively. Yes, there is passive engagement, where is, like I've been saying, where you're just really just running your eyes through something. You're not really doing anything. And then, of course, there's the active engagement, which is what we want from text analysis. Right. Are there any questions at this point? I'd love for some, you know, even any comments, any additions, anything that has sparked your thinking about this idea of analyzing text. It can be in, you know, in this module, or in other modules, or in other parts of your life. All right, I see a question about the PowerPoints. The PowerPoint, the recording, the whole session is being recorded, Bongani. It is being recorded, and it will be posted on the My Life page. Yes, so you'll be able to find it on the website. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions, and I've been hearing my voice a lot. So I want us to just watch a short little clip around this process of text analysis and content analysis. Some of the things you may be able to link back to what I have just explained, but I think that even that is important, because sometimes when you engage with something more than once, it sticks better. Repetition is also one of those things that help with information retention, or yeah. So I am wanting us to just watch this quickly. It's about 10 minutes, and then we will resume our discussion. And please note down if there are any questions or things during this, the watching of this video, that you would like us to engage with. Yeah, otherwise we will move on. And also maybe note that not everything that is discussed here will be applicable to your context. So please just be mindful of that. That is why I'm here, to try to link everything back to our particular context. All right.
Okay.
So I am just going to share this. Please confirm if you see the screen. And if you can hear, actually, that's very important. Okay, that's very important. Can you see and can you hear? Perfect, thank you.
This is part one. Okay, so this is textual analysis part one, and we're going to talk about what textual analysis is and then jump right into content analysis. The second video will feature a similar beginning, but that will actually be reader response, and you'll see that it's labeled textual analysis reader response. So we're going to jump right in. So when we think about communication research, we want to consider that it has developed several ways to analyze communication messages. And so if we understand that a message is what a communication says or means, we can get a better idea of what impact it might have on the receiver. So, to get a clear understanding of a communication message and what it might mean, communication researchers often use research methods called content analysis. Another popular method is called framing, which your book talks about when they talk about deconstruction. And both of these methods attempt to find out what messages are being presented as well as how they are being presented. So your text talks about a text being defined usually in reference to a message that has a physical existence of its own, independent of its sender or receiver. So I want you to look at these two pictures and think about, how could these be texts? Or are they messages? Or are they both? So, when we think about a text from our frame point as postmodern communication researchers, we want to consider that a text is not the same thing as a message, although the two terms are often used interchangeably. Message deals specifically with the meaning of a communication. So, what meaning is being broadcasted? What meaning do we get from it? And a text is a physical component that contains the message. So, I think using those two descriptions, you can see here how Kim Kardashian's book, Selfish, could be considered a text as well as a message, and how Rihanna's album cover for the album Anti could be considered a text as well as a message. So you want to also consider that a text does not usually have only one meaning, and we can see how that applies here. Take a look at this other item that we're looking at from a textual standpoint. So this is one of Hillary Clinton's earlier visual political campaign ads. Think about what would make this a text versus a message. Remember, a text is not the same thing as a message, and a text is the physical component that contains the message, while a message deals specifically with the meaning of a communication. When we think about text, we want to consider that text should be linked to one of three things when we study them from our postmodernist researcher standpoint. One should be talk or social action research that surrounds the text. So we can see how that would apply here, given the political campaign that had been going on for Hillary and as well for Donald Trump. Okay. Secondly, an ongoing process not available for direct observation. So something that we can see and we cannot see, and also something that we can't just observe and are able to make general assumptions about or have all of the information that's necessary. A great example of that would be what we found on Twitter, because Twitter is rhizomatic. People can jump in and out of a conversation, and oftentimes they use so based on the relevancy of algorithms and hashtags. Thirdly, organizational rationality. So, the embodying of social rules. We have a myriad of social rules that we follow, and oftentimes they are modified by our social standards within society, our ideologies, our values, and our belief systems. So when we think about a textual analysis, we have to say, what is that exactly? So textual analysis is the examination of a socially generated text rather than a researcher generated text. So this is something that's coming from a space that already existed. It's not me creating it. It's something that already exists. And I say, hey, I really want to study this because of X, Y, and Z. An example of that would be speeches shared during the Black Power movement versus a focus group that has data coming from it about Black Power movement speeches. The speeches I may be able to put my hands on, they may be handwritten, they may be typed. I may be able to hear audio footage from the actual speeches. I may be able to visually see somewhere some of the speeches, okay? Versus someone telling me what they think about the speech or their reaction to the speech. So with the textual analysis, we are oftentimes really engaging in a certain way with the text. The word text can encompass a variety of things within communication research, and it's not limited to these, but these are just a few examples: bumper stickers, rap album covers, song lyrics, names of sports stadiums, recipe books, scrapbooks, etc. You name it, people have studied it from a textual analysis standpoint. We're going to move on to content analysis. A content analysis is one type of textual analysis, and it focuses on messages in a systematic, rule governed way. This means that we're establishing a boundary about what we're studying and specifically why we're studying. Any message that has an obtainable record can be content analyzed. So an example would be a TV show that's had multiple seasons. Newspaper articles, okay? You can manage those and study those in a certain time frame. You can study certain sections of a newspaper by a time frame. Magazine clippings, print or broadcast advertisements, you name it. We'll see in the digital landscape, people are going to start looking at social media posts, tweets, even though snaps are supposed to be deletable, being able to recover snaps and look at the snap story of someone from the time they started using it to present. All of those things could possibly be a content that we analyze. Some are going to be easier to access than others, obviously. So when we carry out a content analysis, we want to keep the following things in mind. One, we want to clarify the research question via review of the literature. And again, we want to establish a boundary here, that will limit your search, because when we're doing a content analysis, oftentimes people get really excited and they get so much information, and it's great stuff, but it's too much to study and it becomes really overwhelming. So you want to think, to help you in limiting your search, who, what, when, where, why, okay? You want to think about the variables that should be distinct and separate. What types of variables are you looking for? Words, nouns, proper nouns, a theme, okay? Characters, sex, gender, time, space, and items. Secondly, you want to unitize, and that's going to help you find the population that you like to see and that you'd like to use. This will also help you to narrow down to a unit of analysis, understanding that you cannot study everything, but what is going to bring you the closest to responding to your research question. You must also operationally define variables. We talked a bit about that in Chapter 3. You read about that in Chapter 3. Okay, and if you're operationally defining your variables, that helps you to assert what is a good unit of analysis and what is not good for your study. Coding. This is the defined variables that make up your code book along with your content category. So your code book helps you to demonstrate and define and display how the data should be categorized. Content categories must be exhaustive, though, mutually exclusive, and reliable. You can create categories before, during, or after reading through all of the material, and you kind of have to decide what works best for you. Oftentimes people will do what they call a pilot study to kind of test out their methodology to see, like, hey, I'm doing a content analysis and I'm coding for this and I have my code book and I'm going to look at one episode of The Cosby Show and I'm coding for Black masculinity or hegemonic masculinity in The Cosby Show. And hopefully I have made all of the codes necessary for me to measure this. And so your pilot study, after you come back and you carry out that and you do your analysis, is going to help you to figure out, like, were my codes the best? Could I have coded other things? Is it better for me to have a defined coding system? Did I define my variables in the best way that operate the most poignantly within my research, within my study? So, keep in mind that we often have a process that we go through, and that process is never perfect, regardless of the method that you choose.
Okay, so that was just a quick discussion or quick sorry, just lost my train of thought. Okay, just a quick overview of the text analysis or one way of doing it. And of course, this was discussed more in the context of a research paper, or, if you're doing research and you're needing to analyze the text that comes across from the research which you do, which I think is very useful and very important for maybe third year and postgraduate studies. When you are now when you are faced with the concept of having to actually conduct research, and and text analysis would then be part of your research. So let me just get my PowerPoint back up. Are there any questions on what we just watched that you would like us to discuss? Or any additions are welcome as well. It's very quiet in here. I wonder if I'm alone. Is anyone there? Okay. Thank you. Oh, I'm not alone. That's great to know. Okay. Let me put this back up. It is screen 2. All right. So that was, oh no, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I am on the wrong PowerPoint here. Okay, I have found myself. Please bear with me. All right. Right, so we've just discussed what text analysis is, why it is important, and what it helps us to be able to do. Now, I want us to look through how we go about analyzing the text that we encounter. And this is, of course, just one of many ways in which we are able to analyze text, but it is quite a nice guideline for going about really analyzing and breaking down the text, especially when we are faced with a lot of content, which you guys are in this particular module. I think there's a question. Oh, thank you. People just letting me know that I'm not alone. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, so there are various steps that we can use in the text analysis process. You can choose to use one of them or to use all of them, or maybe to skip one or two depending on context. Remember, nothing is absolute, nothing is written in stone. So if you find a process or a guideline that works for you, you are allowed, or you are encouraged rather, to tweak and refine it so that it works for you. And I speak about this, and when I say this, I actually mean it in just every, just every guide or every tip that you are given for your studies or for whatever else. If you are given particular study tips, use what works for you and throw out the rest. Not everything is for everyone, but this is just one strategy that we can use, or one process that we can use to analyze our text. And it really gives us the opportunity to delve in a bit more. Of course, it does require time, but learning requires time, correct? So I think if we give ourselves the time to delve into a detailed text analysis, it's very similar to, it's not similar, but it's likewise with when we talked about summaries, right? You give yourself the time to really engage with the text. You write a good summary, it helps you in the long run. So that same case with your text analysis. You give yourself the time to really fully understand everything that you're reading. It's going to help you in the long run. So in this process, we have 5 steps that, of course, like I said, you can use as you see fit. Right, you can use as you see fit. And the first one is to do a first reading of your text, right? So you read your text uninterrupted just to get the bigger picture of what's happening, right? So at this point, you're not really required to engage very much with it. Of course, you are reading actively, but you just want to see what this text is all about. What is the section all about? If I'm reading the section on qualitative data methods, read the whole section and get an idea of what the whole section is about, so that I know, like, just from a very basic point of view, what qualitative analysis is. And then as you read, you can start just writing down initial observations and feelings. It doesn't have to be neat. It doesn't have to really make sense at this point. I think it's a good point, even if there's a phrase that you don't understand. It's a good place to highlight that phrase or add a question mark to it, so that you know that when you read it again, you need to really pay attention to this particular part. And then you read it again. Right. So this is still part of first one. So you've done an initial reading, and then with sort of your initial notes, and then you read the text again. Sorry, I am very confused. Yes. So step one is you read the text uninterrupted. Step two is when we then go on to making our initial notes. Yeah, so basically things that pop up, things that jump up to you, things that you're able to connect at the spot as you're reading. You're like, oh, qualitative methods usually include, delving deeper into the meanings that people assign to things. And so, you can start making short notes about those things as you go along. And then you go into a second reading. Now we're on step 3. You go into a second reading, and here you make the notes that you make are a little bit more detailed. They should start connecting things a lot better. And this is where you start really seeing, okay, I know from my first reading what the whole section is about. I've made notes of things I want to come back to, or things that I was able to connect and things that made sense. Now in the second reading, I'm going back in and I'm highlighting again, and I'm really adding flesh to my initial notes, right? If there's a question that I have, maybe I'm going to pause and go and read up on it some more, get a better understanding, and then come back to see how it connects with everything else. And then here's also where you start finding out what exactly is the author trying to say. What are the main things that the author wants me to understand from this particular section, right? So that's what you're doing in your second reading. You're identifying also like key themes. Like I said, this is where you start making those connections between the things, getting those key ideas out, basically extracting the key elements out of your text. And then we go on to a third reading. Now, I know many at this point would say, this is overkill. Why am I having to read the same thing so many times? But like I said, you can take what works for you. If a first and a second reading gets you the level of understanding that you feel you need, then you leave it at that, as long as you have engaged critically with your text and that you're able to walk away from it and understand not only what it is about, what the text is, but also the meaning of it, the message of the text, right? Very important. Right, so the third reading is where you sort of start focusing on specific examples and analyze your techniques for meaning. Yes, so here you're looking at what are sort of, again, sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought here. So here we are focusing on building, and this is, I think this step in particular comes up when we are analyzing example for research, or you are analyzing a literature a piece of literature, right? Where you can start finding examples for the points that you raised in the previous step. So if you told yourself, oh, I identify 3 themes or 3 core methods out of this section, then in the next step, you're going back and you're basically finding the examples for those themes or those main points, so that it's not like you're not standing on statements alone. So in your notes, you're able to, and it also, in your notes, you're able to basically back up your analysis or back up your findings of that text. So if you're saying that interviews and ethnography and what's that one? Yeah, interviews and observation and focus groups are some of the core methods of qualitative research, data collection. Where in the text did you see that? When the text highlights the importance of it, or the sort of mainness, I don't think that's a word, but what makes those 3 things the most important. So this is where you're basically backing up, and it's very important to be able to bring out examples for your analysis, and you don't necessarily have to write them down. You can actually just think about it and say, because if someone were to ask you, the best way that we explain things is through examples. So that is a really good way to explain to someone, well, for example, this, and as you can see that even in this session that I try to bring out as many examples, because through examples, you're able to visualize what I'm saying. And in that way, even if you don't remember the exact definitions that I've given, you'd be able to remember the examples that I gave. And the examples will give you an idea of what the definition or what the concept is all about. I see a question. I will come to it after step 5. Yes, so that was step 4. You've done a 3rd reading, very optional at this point. And then step 5 is to then do a detailed study table. They say a study table of your notes or from your notes. But of course, this depends on what kind of text you are analyzing. If it's just your RSC2601 notes, I don't think there's a need to write a table. Maybe just have some notes written down. As long as they are, I think the important thing is that they are detailed. They should be detailed enough for you to not have to go back to your study guide to understand your analysis or to understand what the section is about. So they should just be detailed enough. Include those links, include those main points, include your examples, and this will help you to be able to walk away and say, I proper analyze that text. I totally understand it, and I'm able to apply this concept not only in this module and not only in this chapter, but just in general. And that's really what we want from at the end of a text analysis, that you're able to have walked away, not just understanding what it meant, but really being able to apply it, because that's where the engaging comes in. It's like you were able to apply your mind to what you've read. You're able to make those connections. You're able to develop those examples. So that is very important. Okay, I'm going to go to a question. Are there any questions? I see there is one here, but if anyone else has questions, please feel free to just pop it in the chat. Okay, so the question says, the question is by Bongani. Thanks for your question. The research method that you present, is it only based on text, or are there any extended methods that we can apply in getting our findings? I'm not sure I understand that the last bit of your question, Bongani. Do you want to maybe expound on that? If you can unmute your mic if you feel comfortable with it. But the first part of it, I would say yes, this particular guide really only focuses on a text-based, yes, a text analysis. So I'm not sure I quite understand the last bit. What do you mean in apply in getting findings? Because remember, I think if you're talking about from a research perspective, if you are conducting research, of course, your findings would be in the form of text, preferably, right? So even if you are doing interviews, remember, we always, as researchers, we work with text. So you've done your interviews, then you need to go through the process of transcribing your interviews so that you have some text that you can work with to do your analysis. I don't know if that answers your question, but all our research findings will have to translate into textual form unless we are doing a multimodal analysis, which includes maybe analyzing videos or analyzing images, and then that is a completely different process that follows a different convention. Does that answer your question? All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for that question. So moving on swiftly. I want us to look at something that would come up in step 3 of the previous process. And it said that, and I think this is, I pull this out because I believe that it is one of the most important steps in the process. I believe it's where we will get the bulk of our analysis from when you start identifying the key themes or the key ideas, because essentially that's what we want from the analysis of text, or when your lecturers say, oh, we want you to critically analyze or to read this thing critically. It's about identifying certain things that are not, that you won't find in the text upon just through just quickly reading it. It's something that you need to maybe look into a little bit more, do maybe a second or a third reading, and really apply your minds around. So yes. So some questions that we can ask as we actually analyze our text. So how do we go about finding or identifying these key ideas or these key themes? One of the ways, or probably the most important ways, is to ask questions. So this is also why we did that session on questions last week. I forgot to mention that, it's not just about us having to answer questions, but in this process, we are also encouraged to ask questions. I think as students, as citizens of the world, we have a duty to ask questions. If, for example, the government is not doing what they promised, we have the right to ask questions. And it is in asking questions that you begin to engage with it, because then you're asking things that we would not have found out at just at a surface level. Right. So some of the things that you can ask yourself or look out for as we are analyzing a text is, one, the purpose. Ask yourself as you read a text, what is the purpose of this text? What is it trying to do? And when we ask the purpose, remember, a text can do many things. It can inform, it can educate, which is, I suppose, inform. It can try to convince. Sometimes we read things and we're like, yeah, propaganda. Or, you know, just something where you're like, okay, so the writer is definitely trying to convince me of something. And there are some texts you read and it's like, okay, this writer is just trying to give me information. So what is the purpose of your text, right? And then we can look at the authors. Who has written this text? Sometimes this may not be necessary if, for example, in our academic, well, maybe in our module, it may not be necessary, but definitely as a research student, if you are writing a research paper, you need to ask yourself who the author is. Or is the author credible? Because that will also determine the message or the way that you will engage with that text. If the author is not credible, then you have right or you have reason to suspect the contents of that text, right? So it's also important to think about the author. Who's the author? Are they credible? What position is the author trying to take? And so forth. And then you think about the audience. Who is the intended audience for this text? That will help you determine if the text is doing what it is intended to do. When you think about who the intended audience is. So, So if a particular article is written for grade 9 learners and it is filled with heavy jargon, filled with big academic words, do you think that in that case, that text would have achieved what it was meant? Would that text have communicated the message that it wanted to? I don't think so, because it wasn't concerned with who the audience is, and it didn't write or structure the text in a way that is accessible to the audience, right? And what effects do you feel that the text would have on the audience? That's also very important. And then we want to look at what the topic is. Of course, this is usually, I think, something you're not necessarily needing to think too much about, because it's right there. It will most likely be the heading if it's your study guide. Sampling methods. That's your topic. Very easy. So it's not, but it's something to also to note down, so that you ensure that, you know, you ask yourself, is the author actually sticking on this topic? And I think this is also, I think, just want to note, very important for when you are writing your essays, to make sure that you always ask yourself as the writer, am I still staying on topic? Am I still answering the right questions? Am I still focused on the right thing? Okay, and then you want to look at the research or the sources, and see what references have been used, if any, and how does this add to the text? How does it add to the meaning of it? Do the references or the sources complement what the author has been saying themselves, or does it contradict? Why do you think that the author has used these particular sources, and so forth? So it's a lot of questions that is required of you to ask. I mean, really trying to understand. This is why when we're analyzing, we're really digging deep. We're asking questions upon questions. And actually, mind you, we can get quite carried away. And I've seen it happening where, you know, you get so carried away, start just asking, just analyzing everything, just questioning this. Why did the author say this? Why did the author do that? Especially in, I find in literature and in poetry, we can go down a deep hole of questioning. It's fun, but it is not very effective if we're needing to submit a paper in like 24 hours. All right, I digress. And then you want to look at the proof or the evidence that has been provided for the text. Like, does it make sense in the context of what the author is trying to communicate? You know, does the evidence or the examples come through? Yeah, is it, and does everything that the authors say actually have evidence? Because this is this part about critically analyzing, critically engaging. We can't just take in everything at what the author has said. You know, we have to ask ourselves, where's the evidence? This author is saying that women are more hired in South Africa than men. Where's the evidence? You know, where did he get this information? That where does he back up his statements with words? Because because then that determines how you, or what meaning you take from it, because you can then leave that reading that text saying that the author has made many claims but has provided no evidence, you know, therefore it waters down the message that they were trying to make. Maybe they were trying to make a very important point about gender inequality in South Africa, but because their statement and their arguments lacked proof or lacked evidence, it distorts the way that we as the readers or the audience receive that message, right? And then we look at, and then you ask yourself, I mean, I guess this at the very basic level about the organization of the text itself. How is it organized? Are they, you know, usually they're heading and it's subheadings or sub-themes. Do the themes speak to each other? What is your key take from each of the themes? Does each paragraph have its own topic, etc.? So, I mean, some of these points would be more important than others. Some you can decide to not really bother with because, you know, it all depends on what your task is asking you to do. So some of these elements might not form part of your actual analysis, but it is good to know. You know, very important. Does the text start with a background? You know, that's very important because how do you just jump into something without giving me context, without giving me background information? You know, how do I as a reader then begin to understand your train of thought or your reasoning, or how do I then engage with this text if I don't know where it started, right? How do you just start talking about gender equality without talking about the history of you know, gender roles and all of those things? I mean, even if you don't have space to write about the whole history, sometimes two lines or two sentences is enough to just orientate the reader, to know where they, yeah, just orientate the reader to understand the context of that particular text. And then finally, we can ask ourselves a question about the style. How is it written, the genre, the tone that is taken? You know, the tone also, I think, links very closely to the purpose of the text. So if the purpose of the text is to inform, then, you know, the tone would most likely be very formal. It will be maybe very technical. If the purpose of it is to persuade, then the tone will also be very almost forceful, you know, almost convincing. If the tone is to connect, sometimes we have text like our social media posts. Most of the times we want to sort of just put our opinions out there and connect with other people, see who thinks the same way or people who don't agree. And in that way, the tone or the register that you use will be very different from the register you use when you're writing a business report. Yeah, so style then also becomes something that you can maybe use to understand the purpose of your text. All right, so that was a lot of my voice again. Are there any questions at this point? Any additions, any comments? All right. Thank you for joining us, Alyssa. All right. So there are no questions. Now I want us to actually try this out. I want us to do a very quick exercise through this process because, you know, as I keep saying, we learn with time, by giving something time, and we also learn by doing. So I want us to actually attempt to analyze a piece of text using maybe some, not all, of the components that I've just discussed. So if you'll go into your study guide, sorry, text box. Sorry about the typo there. If you go into your study guide on page 69 to page 70, there's a short, oh no, it is a text box. Yeah, there's a short text box that discusses, let me find it. It discusses, it talks about the South Africa's GDP and the recession and just like the economy of South Africa. It's not very long. Oops, sorry. It's not very long. So I want us to read through it and then read through it once, read through it twice if you must, and then make just very basic, very short notes about what the purpose of this text is, what standpoint the authors have taken, or if there's anything that you can if there's anything that we can say about the author. Think about who the intended audience is, and has the text been, or is this particular text, would you say it's successful? It has successfully delivered its message to the audience. Think about what the topic is and what position the author has taken. That is, what standpoint are they taking on this? Think about the sources that are given. Think about the proof that is given. How is the text or the article organized? And what is the style that is being used to write this text? So maybe if you don't get the answers to all, maybe 2, 4, 6, maybe let's go through 5 of them together. So it is now 18:45, and I want us to maybe give a good 15 minutes to reading, rereading, and then trying to ask yourself these questions as you read and make notes, and then we can come back at exactly 1700 or 7 o'clock, 7 p.m., and discuss what we found. All right, is everyone okay? Does everyone understand what the exercise requires? So these are the things that you need to just look out for. So purpose, author, audience, topic, research or sources, proof or evidence, organization, and style. Right, Ati? So that's what we're looking out for. You can make quick notes. If you have questions, you can write your questions on the side there, and then we can discuss it at exactly 7 o'clock. I'm hoping everyone has access to their study guide. If you don't, please let me know. Either a physical copy or a digital copy will do. All right, so I am here and we will reconvene at 7 p.m. For those of you who have not yet signed the register, please do so. It is linked in the chat box. Thank you. Hi guys. So for those of you who are not able to continue with the session, thank you so much for your participation and for your attendance. Please, please access the feedback evaluation before you pop out. Like I said, we really appreciate and need the feedback so that we know that these sessions are working for you and that they are addressing the needs that you have. So please, before you leave, just fill out the feedback evaluation form there. It is in the chat. So yes, and then thank you so much. Have a good evening. We will continue. I will still be here, of course. Our session is not done, but for those who do need to leave, please fill in that evaluation form before you go. Thank you so much. Okay, so I think I'm going to maybe reduce the time because I see quite a few people are leaving. So I'll give us 3 more minutes for those who are still in the room. 3 more minutes, and if you've not finished, you can always continue in your own time. But I do want us to just discuss and see what has come up from your evaluation of the text. So in about now 2 more minutes, we will reconvene and talk about our findings.
The second one. I just did it. Now we gotta go up here. Ah! Oh, that was so close. All right, I made it. Finish line ahead, boys. Let's go. Don't give anybody the net, please. Yeah, Josh. First place. Woo! It's done for Christmas. Welcome to December 2018. Yeah, guys, what do you ever pick this race? It's not Christmas. Josh, it's not Christmas. Are you stupid? Oh wow. Oh bye, Tilly. Right. This is stupid. Josh, it's not Christmas. Are you stupid? Oh wow. Oh bye, Tilly. Right. This is stupid.
Sorry, Michelle.
Oh no, Trudy, why are you going so slow?
Can you please mute your...
Wait. So Trudy won at $350 new controller, and it's not even on full speed.
Okay, we are back. Hi, Michelle. Okay, hello. Okay, we are back, and I would really like to hear some thoughts. What was your thinking around what the purpose of the text is? Can I have some comments in the chat or just hands raised so we can actually talk? I actually want to hear some voices now, so if you can raise your hand and unmute, and then we can talk. What is the purpose of this text? Yes, I see a hand. All right, perfect. You may unmute and speak to us. Holly, what did you say about the purpose of this text? All right, I see Bongani says the purpose was informative and it was to provide information, economic information. Correct. Did anyone have anything different? Holly, you can unmute your mic and speak if you'd like to contribute. Okay, I see the hand went down. All right, no problem. So I agree that it was very informative, that is the purpose of. You can clearly see that it's very neutral toned, and usually if something is just to relay information, it is going to be very neutral. Is there anything that we can say about the authors and the audience? So guys, I'm assuming that we have all read the text and we have some idea, even if you didn't write it down, but if you've read the text, I assume that you would have an idea about the author or the audience. Holly, I see your hand is up. I don't know if it was from before, but you're welcome to unmute yourself, your mic. All right, so no information about the author or the audience. So I'm not going to provide answers here because I do want us and you guys especially to really see what you can get out of it. Right, Bongani again, thank you. Um, the audience, you say it's influence article in Business Day, and the audience are economists and business people. Correct. Does anyone else have anything to add? Thank you for that, Bongani. Anyone else? Can anyone else think about audience? Michelle, I don't know if you can hear us, if you are still with us, but please turn off your camera. We are currently looking at a blank wall. Thank you so much. Okay. So nothing else about audience. Okay, I would want us to maybe go and think of what else we can get about the audience there, in addition to what Bongani has told us. So thank you again, Bongani. What about the topic and position? What is our topic? Our position, of course, like I said, this is usually the easiest. Tariro says, audience can also be economic students. Perfect, exactly. Exactly. So you can see how these different audiences, economists, business people, economic students, they would understand the implications of that text, right? So they would know what GDP stands for and the implications of a GDP for the country, right? Okay, our topic, maybe I'm going to skip by that one because I've just talked about it, is the economy of the country. They're basically giving us information about that. What about our sources and evidence? What did we get from that? Are the sources that we have, that the author has used, are they credible? If so, why? Tariro says sources stats essay, yeah. But what about it? See, this is the thing with text analysis, right? We want to go beyond that first level. So the first level question would be, who are the sources, which is what you've answered. Then we go deeper and say, are the sources credible? What does the credibility of the sources reveal to us? So I see some responses here. Right, so the topic is about the GDP of South Africa and how it keeps afloat in spite of economic recession. Liesel says the source is Stats SA, which is the government, which equals that it is credible. Right. Bongani says as well, Stats SA. And Crowley says, proof from the finance director and Stats SA released data for the previous year. Exactly. So we can see that the body of Stats SA has quite a high reputation, and we can assume that because it is Stats SA that it is credible. But if it were Lauren's statistics company that no one knows about, maybe then we would have reason in that case to doubt credibility and to doubt the information that is being given. All right, what can we say about can we say anything about the organization of the article and the style of the article? How the article is written. Tario says academic style. Okay. Can you tell us more? Remember, that is our first question. That's our first surface level answer. What does that tell us? Or what can we deduce from that?
Okay. Jaino.
Sorry? Okay, so I mean, it is academic, but I don't think it is only academic, right? Because remember who our audience is. So academic, we're kind of restricting it to only one field. So a better way is perhaps to say that it is a formal, you know, it has a formal tone. It's neutral. The style is neutral. But you're right in saying that the use of language, it's the right use of language, or we can say the formal use of language. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to use language, but that's just my personal opinion. Okay, so if there isn't anything else, I think what I just want to leave with you is that when we're analyzing text, it goes beyond that first answer, right? So we ask the basic questions first in that first reading. And the second reading is where we go a little bit more in depth and you say, but exactly how? Or what is the implication of this? That's how we analyze, right? When we come across that social media post, we don't just ask ourselves, who is this writing? Oh, okay, it's Temba from my high school class. And then we leave it at that, right? I say, okay, but what makes him write this? Or what happened that he's writing this? Who is he writing it for? What message is he trying to convey? What is he trying to do by writing this post? You know, is he trying to persuade people to buy a product? Is he trying to criticize the government? Is he trying to incite political movement? You know, so you need to ask yourselves those other questions when we're analyzing text, especially. Cairo, sorry, your mic is on. Can you please mute your mic? Sarito, your mic, please. So yes, and I think especially when it comes to postgraduate studies or having to analyze data, having to analyze. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of flash feedback. Yes, so when it comes especially to postgraduate studies or a module in which you actually have to conduct research, it's very important when you get your data, when you get information from participants, that you ask yourself those deeper questions. Otherwise, it's just the case of, oh, participant 1 said this and participant B said that. And that is not an analysis. The analysis is asking those deeper questions, trying to understand the meaning behind it and what implication what participant 1 has said has for the way that, you know, they understand a particular thing. All right, I hope everyone is happy with that and understands. If there's anything that you're still unclear about, please schedule a one-on-one consultation, and we will discuss it there. So just in closing, I actually wanted to ask, but I see most of our peers have left. But I did want to ask about if there are any particular issues that you are having right now with regards to this module, any struggles that we can address in our next session, or that I can schedule for later on in the series. What are the particular issues that you're wanting us to discuss? I wanted to again highlight the one on consultation. Sorry, Ro. Someone is. Ooh. Okay, someone is looking for mommy there. Okay, so yes, if there are any key issues that you guys are having, anything you're struggling with, any assignment points that you want us to go over, please feel free to post that in the chat or schedule a one-on-one consultation, and then we can take it from there. Yeah, I think that is it. If there are no other questions or comments. Okay, I see a question. Workshop the 4th of the 5th. Wait, the 4th or 5th. Sorry, let me check. Okay, Bongani, I am not aware of a workshop for the 4th or 5th. Not for this module, unless you mean for another module. But for this module, we only have the sessions every Mondays at 5:30 to about 7 to 7:30. And the next workshop would be next week, Monday. That is the, let me check, the 21st at the same time. Yeah. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? I'm happy to take them right now. No, this is not the first workshop. This is our fourth workshop, actually. Yeah. If you want to chat about the things that we discussed in the previous workshops, please feel free to schedule a one-on-one consultation or to go on your My Life site, and you will find the recordings of the previous sessions. Okay, if there's nothing else, I want to wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining, for participating, and I will see you guys next week. If anyone still wants to hang back and discuss something, I'll still be online until 7:30, so you can just put a message in the chat, maybe when everyone is gone or even now. But I am available, and thank you. Have a great week.